Okay, good evening, everybody. It's 7:30 on Thursday, September 22nd, 2022, and I would like to call to order the Old Bridge, New Jersey Planning Board meeting for tonight. And if we all would, could we please rise and salute the flag? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we get started with regular business, I'd like to hand off to Vina.
Good evening, board members. I just want to introduce the board members to an addition to our planning department. I would like to welcome Maureen Porcelli. She started working with us almost 3 weeks ago. I know she has been sending out emails to the board members and circulating information. You will hear back from her more often now on. And when you call the planning office, she will be the voice of planning department. So her extension is 2355, and the office welcomes her.
Welcome, Maureen. Okay, and with that, we have a swearing in this evening for two new alternate members on the board, Keith McIsaac and James Brennan. And I'm going to pass this off to our board attorney, Joe, for swearing in.
Hi. Would you please both stand? And if you could please repeat after me. Sorry, just making sure the mic's up. I state your name. Do solemnly swear or affirm to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey.
Constitution of the State of New Jersey.
And that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States
And to the governments established in the United States
and the State of New Jersey
and the State of New Jersey
under the authority of the people.
under the authority of the people.
And that I will faithfully,
And that I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly
and justly
perform all the duties
perform all the duties
as a member of the Old Bridge Planning Board,
as a member of the Old Bridge Planning Board,
according to the best of my abilities.
according to the best of my abilities.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
So help me God.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Welcome, gentlemen. Okay, Maureen, can we have the roll call, please?
Chairman Marucci,
Here.
Ms. Cannon,
Here.
Ms. Lenning,
Here.
Mr. Mamakis,
Here.
Mr. De Palma,
Here.
Mr. Lauer,
Here.
Mr. Renner, who I know is absent this evening, Mr. Petty,
Here.
Ms. Masella, Mr. McIsaac,
Here.
Mr. Brennan,
Here.
Mr. Sordillo,
Here.
Ms. Savant,
Here.
Ms. Shapiro,
Here.
and myself, Ms. Porcelli.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to the minutes. And if I could get a motion for the minutes of July 28th, 2022.
I'll move it.
Moved by Mr. De Palma, and a second
I'll second.
by Mr. Lenning. Roll call.
Roll call.
Yep.
Chairman Marucci,
Yes.
Ms. Cannon,
Yes.
Mr. Lenning,
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis,
Yes.
Mr. De Palma,
Yes.
Mr. Lauer,
Yes.
Mr. Petty,
Yes.
Ms. Masella, Mr. McIsaac,
Yes.
Mr. Brennan.
Yes.
Okay, and again, if I could get a motion for the minutes of August 11th, 2022.
I'll move it.
Moved by Ms. Cannon.
I'll second.
Chairman Marucci,
Yes.
Ms. McCannon,
Yes.
Mr. Lenning,
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis,
Yes.
Mr. De Palma,
Yes.
Mr. Lauer,
Yes.
Mr. Petty,
Yes.
Ms. Masella, Mr. McIsaac,
Yes.
Mr. Brennan.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Okay, and we now have two resolutions, the first being 22-2022P, EE Cruise and Company, Inc., major preliminary and final site plan with C variances.
Motion.
Yep,
I'll move it.
motion on that?
I'll mo-
Moved by Mr. De Palma, and a second
Oh, second.
by Ms. Cannon. And then the next is 25-2022.
Chairman, we need a roll call on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Skipping ahead.
Chairman Marucci?
Yes.
Ms. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Petty?
Yes.
Ms. Masella? Yes. Mr. McIsaac?
Yes.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Okay, and the second one is 25-2022P, Chick-fil-A, Inc., amended major preliminary and final site plan with C variances.
I'll move it.
By Mr. Mamakis, and a second by Mr. Lauer.
Chairman Marucci?
Yes.
Ms. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Petty?
Yes.
Ms. Masella? Yes. Mr. McIsaac?
Yes.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Okay, moving on, we have discussions. We have two discussions this evening, and the first is amendment to Old Bridge Township Code Chapter 250-38.1, Economic Development Opportunity District Zoning and Design Standards. Nina?
Good evening, Board. This actually, EDO4 is nothing but OC2 of the Woodhaven GDP that was approved by the Planning Board almost 20 years ago. The OC2 area was slated for office commercial use. However, when the GDP was approved, there were no bulk standards that were applied to the OC2. Now the applicant is gearing up to file an application. However, there are no bulk standards through which I can review the structures that are being proposed. So we thought it was best to adopt an ordinance, have bulk standards crafted in it so that the review process is much easier. Also, in the past, a few months ago, I was in front of the board because with all these GDPs that were approved, especially Oaks 1 and Woodhaven, we are challenged with some of the bulk requirements, especially the impervious coverage standards. When somebody wants to put in a porch or a patio, it becomes very difficult for us to review because they're already exceeding the impervious coverage. So we decided to evaluate each of the different phases within the three sections of Woodhaven. Same thing with Oaks, and create separate zones with bulk standards. So moving forward, it will be easier for the Planning and Zoning Office to review applications when we get one. So this is, again, the continued effort to clean up the ordinance and make it easier. And it is definitely, it's the Economic Development Opportunity Zone. The master plan has recommendations to encourage non-residential development. The master plan recommendations have been consisting for since, I think, 2015. So it is consistent with the master plan. I believe you have a resolution in front of you tonight for consistency. The ordinance will be heard by the council at the next council meeting, which is coming up on the 27th.
Dina, so that will take care of the problem that we're having now in the Oaks with people having to go to the zoning board all the time to...
So this is just for Woodhaven, but I'm working on each of those. So you will see another ordinance because these will be separate zones, right? Oaks is geographically located far from Woodhaven. So we'll create standards, but yes, that will resolve the issue of homeowners going to the zoning office or the zoning board. That is correct.
Okay, so previously there was no restrictions on the size of the homes?
No, that's not true. What happened is the planning board granted a variance on the building coverage. And at that time, nobody really looked at the impervious coverage or what was allowed. So the building coverage the variance that was granted was more than the impervious coverage. What means by that is now the developer has gone and built to what he was approved with the variance. However, there is no space remaining for anybody to put a pool or a deck or a patio, and it triggers a variance, which means homeowners now have to go to the zoning board and ask for that C variance. So we're trying to eliminate that process.
Okay.
Okay, any questions from any of the board members? Vita, you're all complete?
Yes.
Okay, so if this is a positive vote here on the board, it will then go to the council for a public hearing? Okay, so I'm sorry? Ms. Massell?
Yes, actually, what happened is in April, when I revised the master plan re-exam report, we added language in there because in the past, in the last 20 years, we have created almost 22 alternate development patterns, which are cluster zones, where these lots were approved with a smaller lot size in lieu of preserving some open space and creating space which is now maintained by HOAs. But over the years, people have gone in and built in, they've added pools, they've added decks, and they have been going to the zoning board. But I think the land use pattern has changed. We need to reevaluate. We need to see what exists there and then change the zone to allow those accessory structures so that these homeowners then don't have to go to the board. Also, the most important part with these alternate developments are there is no ordinance or there are no standards written. So it's like a guessing game. We have to look at the development and then see what the lot size is and then try to relate it to the current zoning ordinance, see if the standards meet R7, R5. Then if it meets R7, we go back and look. But there is nothing written in the ordinance. So if the officer changes, like now whether it's the Damien or me, we know what applies to certain standards. But over the years, if it's not written or if it's not a part of the ordinance, it will become very challenging. Woodhaven and Oaks, because they're part of GDPs, but it also includes other alternate developments, which includes all the cluster zones. I believe there are 22. That is true. But I think it will, once we fix that, it will be much easier for residents. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, with that, I will ask for a motion. By Mr. Lenning, and a second.
Second.
By Mr. Mamakis.
Chairman Marucci?
Yes.
Ms. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Renna?
Mr.
Oh,
Renazat.
I'm sorry. Mr. Petty?
Yes.
Ms. Masella?
Yes.
Mr. McIsaac?
Yes.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Okay, moving on to our second discussion. This is simply a correction to an error in the amendment to the 2017 Master Plan reexamination.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, I could just give a quick summary of what this is. Back in April of this year, we held a public hearing on a proposed amendment to the Master Plan reexamination. We held a public hearing, there was a vote and a resolution adopted at that April meeting date. However, it came after the fact, we realized that there was actually a typo in the resolution. It wasn't, it was referenced as an amendment to the master plan, when it was actually an amendment to the master plan reexamination. So this resolution corrects that error by making the changes in the resolution to identify that it's an amendment to the master plan reexamination, not the master plan itself. It's a technical, difference, but it makes a difference legal-wise. So we're asking the board to consider this resolution.
Okay, and this requires no public hearing by the council?
No, we've already had a public hearing before this board, and it's the master plan and the master plan reexamination, which is the document of this body, not a document of the governing body.
Okay, but they will get a copy?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Very good. And do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Mr. Lenning, and a second
Second.
by Mr. Lauer.
Chairman Marucci?
Yes.
Ms. Cannon? Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Petty?
Yes.
Ms. Masella?
Yes.
Mr. McIsaac?
Yes.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Next up is a completeness waiver for 48-2022P, I'm sorry, 48-2022P, Morris Habitat for Humanity. And again, it's a completeness waiver. Good evening, sir.
You might need to turn the mic on. It looks like it's red.
If that doesn't work, hit it.
Oh, I saw something turn. There
There
it
it
goes.
goes.
Is that better?
Better. No violence was involved.
My name is Stephen Ward. I represent the applicant, Morris Habitat for Humanity. And this is on the completeness waivers. I'm not sure how the board would like to proceed. At this point, if you want to go through the back and forth with the letters, or...
Well, I think it's important to at least identify which waivers are being requested, and if there's any disparities between those being recommended by the planner, if you could provide some background as justification as to why those are still being requested.
Okay. And do forgive me, Steve Goen was supposed to be here from my office, and I'm filling in last minute. Going to do the best I can.
It's a great position to be in, huh?
So I will run through the list. We had provided the board with a letter dated August 8th, setting forth each of the. I'm going to sit. Is that?
If you could sit and speak clearly into the microphone.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Better.
Is that better? Okay. Our office had provided the board with a letter dated August 8th with regards to the waiver requests. Those requests are set forth therein. The applicant is requesting a waiver from item 3A, the environmental impact statement. That request, basically this was a property that was previously developed. The applicant did conduct and submit a phase 1, and no areas of concern were identified. And as such, the applicant requests a waiver from the environmental impact statement. The second waiver, did you want to discuss each one as we go, or?
If I may.
Yeah.
So, board members, this is 200 Lawrence Parkway. If you may recall, this site was a part of our approved, court-approved housing element and fair share plan to build 12 affordable units, and it's a 100% municipally sponsored project, which will contain semi-attached single-family homes, 12 units, and Morris Habitat for Humanity is building the project. We have been working very closely with them to work on a concept. In fact, Nicole started working with them way before I got into the process, when it was another developer who was building it, but then it didn't come to fruition, and now we have Morris Habitat that has been working very closely for almost 2 years with the agency and then the administration to come up with this project. I fully support few of the waivers. There are few items which actually the applicant has already provided. So some of them, they're not even waivers anymore. Our office is in receipt of those items. The only items that the board that I was recommending that the board require is 15, 18, 19, 34D, 34F, and 39B, which has been provided. Tree removal plan is, it's a temporary waiver. They will provide it before the final hearing. The rest all, I already have received them.
So Vina, maybe, do you mind then identifying which of the actual
Yes.
items are going to be still subject to the waiver request?
Yes, so it's the 3A. I'm sorry. The ones that will be submitted or the office is requiring is item 15, item 18, 19, 34D, 34F, and 39B. And the ones that are waived are 3A, 21, 32A, 37A, 44, 46, 52 is a temporary waiver.
Thank you, Vina.
No problem.
And you agree with that summary, that those are the requests for the waivers before this board this evening for completeness purposes are those items that Ms. Sawant just identified?
I do, and our office did submit the supplemental documents on September 19th. And yeah, so the last remaining item would be the temporary waiver for the tree permit plan and application, which we can submit prior to the hearing or as any condition of an approval.
Okay. And Vina, you're okay with that, that we'll be able to deem it complete, but they will be providing that tree permit at some point? Okay. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I kind of took over there. but-
No, that's good, that's good. Okay, and I'm busy writing. Does that complete your testimony?
It does, unless there's any questions from the board or
Okay.
the consultants.
Okay, do we have any questions from the board professionals or more comments? Board members? Okay, and I should open this to the public as well, right?
No, this is a
don't, okay.
completeness, yeah.
Okay.
Just requires a vote if there's no questions.
Okay. Okay. With that, if we're all wrapped up, we'll put it to a motion.
I do have one question, I guess, because I don't want you to vote and then I'll walk away. How does it work with setting the date for the hearing?
So tomorrow morning, we'll issue a letter and we look at the schedule and give you a date for the hearing.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right? Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
And second by Ms. Cannon. Roll call?
Chairman Marucci?
Yes.
Ms. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Petty?
Yes.
Ms. Masella?
Yes.
Mr. McIsaac?
Yes.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
we're all set. Thank you, sir. Okay, and on the agenda this evening, we had two applications, and the first was adjourned. So tonight, we're going to hear 40-2022P AC Power 16 LLC, and it's a major preliminary and final site plan.
Chairman Marucci, I just want to say this with MBM, the first application, the office just received a letter of adjournment and it has been adjourned till December 31st. They are still working with us on the concept and clearing some of the issues that we had raised in our initial review. So we don't have a hearing date for them yet.
So Vina, does that mean that they'll be renoticing?
They have to, yes.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
So I'm Jennifer Porter. I'm the attorney for the applicant. I'm here with Chiesa Shihanian and Gian Tomasi on behalf of AC Power 16 LLC.
Okay, we have to have Joe swear you in.
Yes. Both witnesses are going to be testifying this evening?
Yes, they will.
Okay. Would you please both raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, I do. Okay. Just for the record, each of you, if you could please state your name, spell your last name, and identify who you are on behalf of the applicant.
Christopher P. Rosati, R-O-S-A-T-I, with FWH Associates, Toms River, New Jersey, engineer and planner for the project.
Wolfman from AC Power, and it's G-I-N-A-W-O-L. M-A-N.
We'll deal with qualifications of the expert when you proceed and present his
Sure.
testimony.
We would do them one at a time as they go?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Ms. Wolfman will be testifying as a fact witness, and so I'll give her background, and then I'll qualify, of course, our engineer and / planner.
Perfect.
Can we speak more clearly into the microphone when it's your turn? Just pull it close and,
Sure.
Thank
Better?
thank you.
Yeah, you should switch. Okay, before I begin, prior to tonight's hearing, the applicant did provide the board secretary with a copy of our affidavit of publication and mailing, which indicates that the applicant did comply with the requirements with respect to written notice and publication. So we believe that this board has jurisdiction to proceed in connection with this matter. Tonight, the applicant is seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval, along with some minor deviations from the redevelopment plan in connection with its proposal to develop a solar energy facility. The solar energy facility is proposed on property which is located at 1 and 3 Global Access Road and is designated as Block 4185, lots 25.11 and 26 on the tax maps of the Township of Old Bridge. Now, by way of background, the subject property is located within an area in need of redevelopment, and zoning for the property is governed by the Global Landfill Redevelopment Plan. The redevelopment plan was recently adopted, as I'm sure this board was aware, in June of 2022 to permit solar facilities on the property. Additionally, the subject solar facility is an already awarded community solar project, which is significant because it will be providing several significant benefits to the community, among them including offering reduced rates to low and moderate income households and serving 100% residential, which you'll hear more about from Ms. Wolfman. The project has a deadline of November 4th, 2023, pursuant to its award to reach commercial operation. The applicant is seeking some deviations from the terms of the redevelopment plan, including with regard to required fencing and the plan's requirements with respect to widening portions of Global Access Road, which is a private driveway, to be 20 feet wide, and then to the extent necessary from the MLUL and the plan regarding structures to abut a street. So discuss the application this evening. We intend to call 2 witnesses. First, Gina Wolfman, a representative of the applicant, AC Power 16 LLC, and then Christopher Rosati of FWH Associates, who will be testifying as both our civil engineer as well as our professional planner. So if the board has no questions for me, I'd like to begin with our first witness.
Thank you.
Great. Oh,
Is this working? I think, okay, I'm good. So you can hang on to that.
great. So Ms. Wolfman, if you could please introduce yourself to the board and provide the board with your professional background.
Sure. So I'm Gina Wolfman. I am a senior director on the project development team at AC Power, and I've been in commercial solar development for about 5 years, formerly in a position where we did greenfield work and now solely brownfield, so bright fields to brownfields. I have a long history in the environmental industry. I worked in consulting and engineering with a focus on environmental remediation, hazardous waste remediation, natural resource assessment and wetlands delineation, and then environmental planning, brownfields and reuse, redevelopment planning, grant writing, environmental impact analysis for large-scale development projects, site plan and subdivision work in the New York tri-state area. And I am admitted to the bar in New York and hold a certificate in environmental law.
Great.
Thank you.
Could you describe your involvement and affiliation with the applicant?
So I am managing the permitting for the project, so local permitting, site plan review, as well as the New Jersey DEP and EPA permits and approvals we need to develop the project, and supporting our engineer on other approvals with the county and Soil Conservation District. I'm also involved in title review with a focus on site access and utility easements, and support interconnection with JCP&L. We have others on my team that filed the application and work through that, but I assist as needed.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, can you please provide the board with some general background regarding AC Power 16 LLC?
Sure. So AC Power LLC 16 LLC is an entity affiliated with our company AC Power, and we're a woman-owned solar developer focused solely on just siting solar projects on underutilized and previously disturbed sites, so landfills, Superfund and brownfield properties, sand and gravel pits, and reclaimed mine sites. And our leadership team has relationships in the industry. We're building a portfolio of sites with Fortune 500 companies and large-scale landowners, property managers, and municipalities, all on previously disturbed sites. And we've had lots of projects on landfills, ranging from RCRA sites to Superfund to improperly closed landfills, as well as brownfields.
Great. And how many projects currently does AC Power have in New Jersey?
We've developed 9 projects in New Jersey, and 6 are operational before my time, but we do have one right up the road, the Kimbuck Superfund landfill site in Edison. Deptford was a sand and gravel site. We have 2 landfill operational projects in Delanco. Gloucester, a former asbestos landfill site down there, it's an Owens Corning property, and a landfill in Hapatcong, others in development. And in December 2019, AC Power was awarded 3 projects out of 45 that were awarded for the New Jersey Community Solar Year 1 pilot program. So that was the Kimbuck landfill, Deptford, and a private landfill down in Cinnaminson. Year 2, we were awarded the Global Superfund site, so this project, and we're happy to be here working on that. Kimbuck is right down the road, a very similar site to Global. It's a Superfund landfill. We work closely with the Township on the site plan review, and as well as DEP and EPA in getting the approvals. We engage with the responsible parties on the project, as we are on Global, and engage the community and gain their support. And we're also working with Owens Corning on a couple other sites that I'm not involved in at the moment.
Great. Now, in your position as the senior developer and with project development, are you familiar with the applicant's proposed development of a solar facility at this location?
Yes, I am. I've been working with our engineers from the initial design and up to the present.
Great. Now let's move directly to the property. So if you could briefly describe the property and its relevant history for the benefit of the board.
Okay, so the Global landfill, for those of you who don't know, was operational from about 1968 to 1984, at which time operations ceased, landfilling operations. And in 1989, the US EPA designated it a national priority list Superfund site, so it's on the NPL list. And that was in 89. So from 89 forward, a variety of corrective actions and remedial measures have been implemented at the site, including stormwater and leachate collection and management, landfill gas collection and management, and groundwater monitoring. And currently, the site is managed by Golder Associates on behalf of the responsible party group, and environmental monitoring as well as operations and maintenance are ongoing at the site. So we're in cooperation with that group.
Thank you. And what brought AC Power to this particular site at this location?
I believe it was somebody affiliated with the PRP group who approached us.
Okay, now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the background in terms of your ownership with respect to the property or leasehold interest. Could you provide the board with some information as to the applicant's proposal as it relates specifically to your interest in the property?
Sure. So AC Power LLC is the applicant for the proposed 2.8 megawatt DC community solar project, and 4 easement agreements provide access to the site, and it allows for exclusive ingress and egress to and from the property. There's an entity, Old Bridge RE Urban Renewal, that is responsible for acquiring the property from the current owner, Basin Realty. And it's also the entity that'll be entering agreements. There's a redeveloper agreement and financial agreement with the township, and ultimately that entity will be the lessor and owner. Then AC Power 16 will be the owner and operator of the solar facility. It will hold all the permits and approvals for the project and will be lessee.
Great, thank you. Now turning to the specifics of the project itself, if you could briefly describe the solar facility that's proposed.
As Jennifer mentioned, we were awarded the project in year 2 of the Community Solar Program. We have a commercial operation date of November 4th, 2023. That's an important date for us, an obligation we have under the Community Solar Program. The offtake for the energy will be 100% residential, and members of the community can subscribe through a third-party organization for up to 20% savings on their current electric bill. And of the power generated, 50% or more will be dedicated to low to moderate income households.
Great. Now, could you please address the suitability of this solar system on the site? So let's talk about suitability from the perspectives of location, land area, topography, solar capacity, and interconnection.
So the location of the global landfill is actually really ideal for solar development for a number of reasons. It's in an isolated area with restricted access and is compatible with surrounding land uses. And we're developing the top of the landfill, so it's set back, like way back from the property lines, has full exposure to the sun, which is important, and the topography lends itself to development being virtually flat or having gentle slopes.
And can you speak to the general suitability of solar projects on landfill sites?
Yeah, so under the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law, development of solar on landfills is encouraged and is also a permitted use in all zones throughout the state. In addition, it meets the definition of an inherently beneficial use. And they're typically no other viable or very limited, depending on the environmental conditions at the site, but very few end uses that are viable, and we can bring these properties back to life, so to speak. This is a Superfund site, really with no other use. You cannot have occupants, no residents, anyone there. The public is restricted from accessing it, so it's a passive commercial use.
Great, and could you next describe briefly how the solar system will work? First off, by talking about how the solar panels themselves will work.
Mm-hmm. So without getting into any engineering, and Chris will be talking you through the plans in a bit, but generally the array is sited so that the modules are 2 in portrait, so one on top of the other, and they face north-south, and the rows run east-west across the site. We use bifacial modules because they absorb light from the entire front surface as well as reflected light from the ground on the underside, so they're very efficient. And they have a coating on them to absorb light, and they're designed for that and not to cause glare or reflect. Any associated equipment, electrical equipment, will be sited on a pad, a concrete pad inside the gate on the property, and utility poles that are owner poles will also be on the property.
And how does the facility then connect to the grid?
So JCP&L is our utility, and interconnection will be through them. We have an agreement with the utility. The existing lines along the access road will be upgraded, and the final point of interconnection, or POI, will be designed by the utility engineers. I believe they're just starting design. I've been prompting them on that. And will all be within the existing utility easements they hold with current property owners. And we'll tie into the three-phase lines somewhere within the Middlesex Builders property. I don't recall the exact pole, but that, again, will be handled through JCP&L engineering staff.
Great. Now, I know you mentioned some of the community benefits with respect to the project, but could you describe in a little greater detail some of the additional benefits in connection with this project?
Sure. So the big one is repurposing a Superfund site, which is a huge benefit to everyone in the community and I think on the planet, in my opinion. And community solar, again, is a benefit to local community. We're providing benefits to residents, particularly low-income, moderate-income housing households. And there will be increased ratables to the town. I believe this property has not generated much, if anything, for quite a while. And there'll be no impact to municipal services, so no residents will be generated from the project, so nobody's using municipal facilities, no water demand or wastewater needs, no waste disposal, no roads for the town to maintain. So basically it's and no addition to emergency services. And yeah, that's it. So no impact to the township.
Great. Now, can you address the timing and the anticipated life of the system? So first, starting with timing of construction.
Timing, I don't have the construction schedule, but the project will need to be fully operational, again, November 4th, 2023. So that's our goal, to keep moving forward. And we don't have the agreements in place yet, but the lease would typically be 25 years with 2 5-year renewal options, so up to 35 years.
Great. Now, can you walk through and confirm that the applicant will comply with certain requirements of the plan? First, that all solar energy system collector installations must be performed by a qualified solar installer.
Yes.
Okay. And second, prior to operation, the electrical connections must be inspected by the construction office or other appropriate electrical inspection agency as determined by the township.
Yes, they will.
And finally, any interconnection to the public utility grid must be inspected by the appropriate public utility engineering staff.
Yes.
Great. Now let's move to the decommissioning process, since that's often a point of interest in terms of what will happen to the property after the useful life of the panels in the solar energy system. Would or will the applicants agree to remove the solar panels and associated equipment if no longer in use?
Yes, we would. And I'll keep it brief, but there's a decommissioning sequence that's typically followed. We would disconnect the PV facility from the power grid, and then all wiring, modules, conduits, the racking, the foundations or steel posts that go into the concrete ballasts, everything would be recycled and transported off-site. The ballasts themselves would be broken down and removed and recycled, sent to a concrete recycling facility, and any waste would be removed. The electrical equipment that's on the pad, again, is recyclable, so the transformers and combiner, any metering, all of that would be recycled as well. And the access road would be left in place because we're using the existing road up the landfill, and that needs to stay there for ongoing O&M and environmental monitoring.
Great. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, that completes this witness testimony?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, do we have any questions and comments from the board professionals?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to, I heard low and moderate income. I didn't hear the percentage.
Greater than 50%.
Or of the project will be assisting low and moderate income.
Okay, Vina, anything?
Gina, if I recall, when I was presenting the redevelopment plan to the council, and I want the board to know that there was a formula wherein if you subscribe, the power that is generated goes to the GSCP&L grid, but the subscribers will get a reduction in their utility bill by 20%. Is that correct? And that includes the subscription fees too. So including the subscription fee, any user of the facility would get a reduction in the utility bills, correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Can you elaborate on that so that the board understands?
So basically, everyone would receive two bills, and one would be from the subscriber and one from the utility company, and that would account for the discount. I don't know, I don't have one to show as an example. Have you dealt with that at all? Yeah, we could get more into it, but it's a little bit of paperwork, but there are two bills received, and then the discount is accounted for between the two of them through the subscriber. And I believe you can subscribe online, sign up for it.
And is there any initial upfront fees?
I don't believe so. I don't think there is. We can follow up on that, and I'll let Vina know.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I believe there was just a subscription fee, but there was no upfront fee.
Okay, no equipment fees or anything, or
No,
is the
not
house
to the
and dwelling
residents.
has to be outfitted with certain interface, certain equipment?
No.
Oh, you can get to all that. Okay, okay. I want to skip ahead. Okay, anything else from the board professionals?
No.
No? Okay, board members, Mr. Lauer?
Yes, you mentioned that there was an agreement with the township. I'm assuming there's no cost to the township at all in this project?
No. So there'll be a redeveloper agreement and a financial agreement, and that's a separate process within the township. And I think maybe Vina could explain how that works. That's underway right now. I believe Mr. Roselli will be reviewing those agreements.
Okay, but the bottom line is that it's not going to cost the township any money then?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lauber, just to elaborate on that, this is a part of a redevelopment process. So any approvals by the planning board are conditioned to the applicant entering the redevelopers agreement and the pilot. But you have to remember, this site has not been yielding any taxes. In fact, it has a huge tax delinquency. By creating the solar facility, we will be eliminating that situation. And that has been talked with the redeveloper, but again, we have to still finalize the redevelopers agreement and the pilot, and we are working on it.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Mr. Lenning, your finger looks like you're going for your... Right, I'll jump in while you're thinking. Question I have is, you mentioned that there's no emergency services. What happens in case of a fire?
Oh, I meant the project wouldn't generate any additional services from what's currently there. And we have met with, or not met with, but we had a meeting with and responded to comments from Thomas Miller,
Okay.
the fire official. So
Okay.
we'll be coordinating with him to make sure he's comfortable with everything. In fact, Chris will talk about that, but we'll be meeting him on site and doing a visit there
Okay.
to
And
address his concerns.
Okay. And you mentioned poles, and I missed who you said owns the poles. JCP&L own them, or do you own them?
There's some that are ours, or the owners, and then some that are utility poles. So the utility, they have poles all the way down the access road, and then we have, I believe it's up to 4 poles with the owner's equipment. So the metering and other reclosers and things, so that would be on our property, and then JCP&L would take over after.
Gotcha. Okay.
Is it up to 7 poles? I can't remember.
This might not be directed to you, but do we know how many houses this solar field could service?
2.8, is it 2,000?
2,000?
It's 2.8, DC. Okay, don't quote him, but maybe 2,000.
That's pretty substantial, 2,000 houses.
Would that be new construction
We'll
as well
follow
as
up on
existing?
that.
You'll get into that? All right. By the time your testimony, we're ready for your testimony, you're not going to have it.
One more question. Is this program exclusive to Old Bridge residents?
No, it's the surrounding area as well.
Okay.
Right.
Because it's right on the border of Old Bridge, so I just wanted to know if it was going to...
How far reaching? What other towns?
I'll have to follow up on that. I'm not sure exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we swear?
He actually is sworn in. We just didn't qualify him as a expert engineer and planner at this time. So he can actually provide testimony. He's sworn in, and then we can follow up with his qualifications during his direct.
Look at it this way, we're getting it all done up front.
So yeah, you can provide testimony.
Okay, so real quick, just to explain a little bit more on the community solar.
Can we mark this in as Exhibit
Yes.
1 or Exhibit A?
Sure. Do you usually do A1?
A1?
These two? Okay.
So A1 is a colored rendering of our overall site plan, part of the submission package, sheet 3 of 6. So the colored rendering shows our proposed design of the solar array on top of the landfill mound, I'll call it, I guess. You can see the entrance road terminating in a cul-de-sac of sorts on top of the mound, and the blue shaded areas are the solar panels mounted on the arrays themselves. Now, something about the community solar program, you have to think of it, because the question was asked, does anything have to be added to anyone's home? The answer to that is no. The reason these community programs exist is to allow people who can't put something on their home, or they live in an apartment complex, a condominium, an HOA that doesn't allow things on the structure under which they live, to give them the opportunity to get the benefits from a solar project. So subscribers essentially will own or rent or lease a piece of this array, and that will help offset some of their electrical costs as they live in their home. So it's a kind of a remote system for them. So it's typically the towns in the vicinity. A lot of times it's not on a municipal boundary, so the bulk of the residents in the town will be the recipients of the program, but being that we're pretty close and right on the neighbor of Sayreville, some Sayreville residents will be beneficiaries as well.
Okay, question on that. If you're stating that each homeowner or resident will have a little portion of that grid, what happens if that portion fails?
Well, it's overall, okay? So on a perfect day, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, everything's nice and clean, everything's functioning. We're going to generate 2.8 megawatts DC from the array. So that person owns, say we have roughly 5,700 panels, so 5,000 panels. It doesn't say, you're not allocated a specific panel in a specific array. Okay. You're allocated a percentage of the production. Gotcha. If we have a month of rain and snow, the production's going to go down. So then your allocation in that terrible month is going to be lower than it was, say, in July or even August and September of this year. We haven't had rain probably in the last month, so an array such as this would be very productive. We're on top of the hill. We have zero shading effects. We are facing the south. It's going to be a great array, and it's going to be very productive under sunny times. So when panels go down, it's not going to affect, Chairman Marucci. It's going to affect the average on the whole, and then it'll just be adjusted accordingly. Jumping ahead, the arrays themselves, or the whole array, will have what we call as telemetry. So it'll be a computer-controlled and monitored system, so down to the panel level. So if a panel goes out for whatever reason, sometimes panels fail, or a bird hits it or something and there's a crack and it's malfunctioning, when it's below a certain criteria, they'll note on the program panel, 37 in row 1 has an anomaly, they'll then go out and they'll check it, and then if needed, they'll repair it. So, it's in everyone's best interest to have this thing working 100% all the time. They're very expensive. So when something's malfunctioning, they'll go out and fix it. I'll get to that, the maintenance of it in a little bit.
Yeah, Chairman, maybe I suggest, just because we can always go back to add additional questions to both witnesses as we go on.
To qualify.
And we open up to public questions of the witness that we're on, then move on to the next witness, so that way we can get all the answers all at once. It's kind of a complicated application, so.
So you want me to open up the public for the?
Yeah, for the first witness, we'll allow out the public and then move on to the next witness, so that way we're not kind of mixing the testimonies
Okay,
together.
and then we'll grab his qualifications after
Yes,
that?
absolutely.
Okay, so do we have any questions from the public for the first witness? Okay, I will close the public portion, and then we'll move on to your qualifications.
Sure. I am a licensed professional engineer and professional planner in New Jersey. I have a degree from Rutgers University in civil engineering, graduated in 1994. I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm almost 28 years in this business. I've been licensed since 1999 as a professional engineer, licensed since 2000 as a professional planner. Both my licenses are current with the state. I have previously testified in this town, but it's probably been over 10 years, so I have been qualified before. I have been working in basically land development since I got the job in July of '94. My experience goes from a single lot plot plan all the way up to being lead designer, project manager for several hundred unit developments. 2 years of my career, I was an assistant township and planning board engineer in the township of Millstone, Monmouth County. And then I went back to FWH Associates to go on the private side. I'm a principal in the firm, and I am their director of land development, so it's my responsibility for quality control and et cetera for the plans that leave our office.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So if we could begin your formal presentation in terms of going through the existing conditions of the site and then going to describing the proposal.
Okay, I have another exhibit, an aerial exhibit, that might help to start. And I guess we'll label this as A2.
Yes.
Now,
You
A2
could just
is...
state who prepared it and the date. Yep.
A2 is titled Aerial Exhibit prepared by FWH Associates, Lot 25.11 and 26, Block 4185, dated September 21st, 2022. So A2 is the aerial photo, and it speaks volumes of how remote we are. The access road we've been talking about is a gravel access road coming off of the residential area, going down the hill, sort of terminating at the gate for the Superfund site. And then once the gate opens, there's a gravel area near some of the, I guess that we call them reclamation apparatus at the bottom of the hill for the landfill. And then there's a gravel road that goes all the way to the top. And we talked about the cul-de-sac previously. You can see it in the middle of this green shaded area on A2. We are, again, block 4185, lots 2511 and 26. The entire site is over 95 acres in size. We are quickly switching to A1. We're a little bit over 7.5 acres of area that we're going to be improving with the proposed solar array. We talked about the site being a former landfill. If you've even been at the bottom of the driveway, you can kind of appreciate the size of it. It's about 90 feet in elevation difference from the bottom to the top. The proposed array will be on the top of the mound where it's fairly level. We want it fairly level for several reasons. One, it's just easier to construct and it's easier to lay our array. But if you don't know, in the past there was a slope failure in the, the southeast quadrant of the array, and the DEP and EPA, who have jurisdiction over this landfill, wanted to make sure that we were well away from that former failure area to the level where we had a geotechnical engineer do some calculations with our proposed array and load on that somewhat flat area on the top of the pile or the mound, that we will not have any deleterious effect on the slopes. So again, if you've seen it, it's a pretty steep slope, but at the top of the site, it's 7-8 acres. It's relatively flat, and the array will be, again, as Gina said, we have kind of an east-west orientation of the array elements, and they will be obviously facing south, which is the benefit there too, going back to A2, is they will be facing away from any residences. Yes, the arrays are absorptive also, so they're not a reflective surface. However, they will be facing away from any residence, so that's a double help for us. I'm sorry, let's leave this up again. So we can see the surrounding area. Surrounding area to the northwest, as you can see, is relatively dense residential development. But then you look, 3/4 around the site is wetlands. I'll call it a little bit of swamp area. We have a stream corridor going roughly north-south. Again, talking to the isolated nature of the site. Again, and we're also 90 feet in the air. It's going to be imperceptible to the bulk of the public that this is even there. The road itself, I don't know if many people know about it. It looks like a driveway that's for the complex in Old Bridge, but then all of a sudden it changes to a gravel road, and then it leads to this site. So we're fairly isolated. There's a limited access. For one, there's a fence along the north and easterly areas, but the rest of it is pretty much protected by the fact that it's very difficult to traverse the terrain that's around the landfill, just by nature of the beast of what's here. You can see the stream corridor and these little swampy areas around it, so it's very difficult to get in there. So as far as security, the natural elements really help us out as well.
Excuse me, Chairman Marucci, can you have them some of our new members here don't know the geographics of where exactly it is. So one point is Kohl's Shopping Center. And then you'll get a reference point there where Kohl's Shopping Center is. It's back behind that. So some of our members don't know where.
Okay, sure.
Well, the only two that have been out there is probably Casey and I.
And just going off of A2, the Garden State Parkway kind of runs north-south to the east of the site. We talked about our neighbors in Sayreville. Again, pointing to A2, we have a kind of an east-west line. That's the municipal boundary between Old Bridge and Sayreville. So on this exhibit, we are showing both Old Bridge development and Sayreville development.
Great. Now, could you please speak to the zoning
Yes.
and the permissible use in connection with the property?
So we are on the Global Landfill Redevelopment Plan FGL zone. Ground-mounted solar energy facilities are a permitted use. They are, again, we are going to be 2.8 megawatts in size. Again, we're roughly 5,700 panels strong in this array. They are, right now, we're slated as 485 watt panels, which is fairly robust. When I first started doing this several years ago, the 485 watts was unheard of. So we're getting a lot more output from modern elements versus we were even from 4 years ago. It's quite a step up. We talked about them being in portrait position because the panels are roughly 7 foot by 3 foot. So they're going to be the 7 foot dimension is roughly vertical on that 20-degree tilt, and we'll have two on top of each other. So the array from bottom to top will be about 14 feet. It'll be 3 feet off the ground at the base, and that allows for mowing operations, et cetera. So that results in the top of it, based on the geometry of the tilt, to be about 8 foot 4 inches to the highest point of each array element. The arrays themselves will, to a certain extent, follow the contours of the land. Each array element will be on a steel frame in a ballasted, we call it a ballasted foundation. Again, we are on a landfill. We cannot touch the landfill cap even an inch. The DEP, EPA regulates this thing very strongly, so everything has to be above grade, including the wiring that runs from the array elements down the hill of that access road to what our combiners and our transformers, et cetera. So everything is above grade. So we have these concrete foundations. So between foundation points, roughly 8 to 10 feet, say, it's going to be relatively level. But if you look at it from a bird's eye view, it's going to look like it's following the contours of the land. But again, the land at the top isn't crazy steep, so it's just going to undulate a little bit. But from element to element, foundation point to foundation point, it's going to be relatively level, and we can level that on the ground with the foundations themselves.
The foundation's basically pads that's
Correct.
set on top
Yeah,
of the
there's
ground?
a couple ways to do it. One of the ones that we've worked on in a previous landfill is there's like little plastic tubs, and they actually pump concrete to them, and the steel column sits in that concrete, and that's the base. It's really just it's to hold it down. It's to hold it against wind loads, what have you.
Yeah, what prevents uplift? What anchors it to the ground?
It's the weight of the concrete holds that steel column, and that holds it to the ground. And
It's got to be massive then.
It's not too bad because it's a relatively light system, and we're not that high off the ground. Again, the highest point's only 8 feet. But again, we'll be doing wind load, not us as the civil site, but the structural engineer will be presenting structural calculations to your building department, showing that we're compliant with all building codes. So all building codes from a structure standpoint, as well as all building codes from an electrical standpoint. So the panels themselves produce DC electric. That's direct current. Everything that we're accustomed to, all the lighting in this building, is AC, which is normal electrical code. We have to convert it from DC to AC, and that's going to be done on the array elements themselves. There's a device an inverter that will change DC to AC. So all the wiring that's going to be above grade, that runs from the array elements going back to A1 down the hill towards our. See if I can point to this a little bit better. At the bottom of the hill, probably pretty close to where the entrance gate is, there's going to be a small concrete pad with combiners and a transformer that then's going to put cabling up to the proposed poles, thence to the system and the grid. That's going to be all above grade, but that's all going to be normal AC current, which is going to be what we normally are used to even in our household. So that's, again, all per NEC code, all going to be reviewed by not only JCP&L, but your local subcode officials as well. We have a total of 45 rows of panels. The reason you're seeing kind of a break in between is there are several gas vents on top of the mount. And those gas vents are in place, and they are sacrosanct as far as the DEP and the EPA are concerned. We have to be 10 feet away from them on all directions with any array element. And they asked us specifically to modify the plan to kind of give them a central corridor for their inspection, because they go out there periodically to do gas readings, what have you. So the array, again, is designed to, one, get the roughly 2.8 meg of output, but we also have other constraints from, again, the slope standpoint, the venting standpoint, the access road standpoint, and again, we cannot touch this cap. We can be on top of it and we can walk on it and put things on top, but any sort of disturbance that's going to mess with the grade or an excavation is strictly forbidden. The array elements themselves, or each row is about 9 feet apart. They're further apart in areas where we just have to be, we have to give space for those venting ports. Again, we talked about the maximum height is roughly 8'4". That's going to be a little bit variable again because we're on an undulating site, but the max allowable is 15 feet. We are going to be well under the 15 feet. We don't have, again, we don't have any shading issues or anything like that, so it's good to be as low as we can because we have wind issues. Again, we're on the top of the hill, so as low as we can be is best for us. It saves on structure and foundation issues. We're going to be a 20-degree fixed tilt angle. They're not going to be variable. They're just going to be fixed in place. Let's talk about the access and circulation, and then that'll touch a little bit upon the situation where there's something wrong with one of the elements. Someone will have to go out there. Once the array is constructed, it's typically once a quarter or maybe just once every 6 months, someone will need to go out there. And it'll be a small work van or a pickup truck. And that's what we're talking about as traffic load here. Once it's up and running and functioning properly, maybe 4 times a year, other than when we're mowing, because there's a metal grass mix that's going to be put on top of here for a ground cover. That's going to be mowed about 3 times a year. So maybe 10 trips per year with a vehicle that's going to be visiting this site. So it's completely innocuous. It's very self-sufficient, so to speak. It's not an intense use by any stretch of the imagination. But we have to give them access, and then that will lead to the issue with your fire department and emergency services. The plan or the redevelopment plan calls for the improvement of that access road. One, there's a paved section that's about 900 feet long from the main road leaning down towards the, I guess it's an apartment complex, and then the pavement terminates, and then it switches to a gravel access road. We are, the plan calls for that to be repaved. We are of the opinion that the pavement's in pretty decent shape, and we just want to do spot repairs where needed. We talk with fire, and we need to provide a road and a gravel road subsequently from that to support a 30-ton vehicle, and we will be submitting revised plans showing a specification for that. We're going to need that anyway because we're going to be bringing concrete trucks here to pump up to create the foundation elements for this. So we are going to need a beefed up road anyway just to get the construction to go. So it'll be obviously left in place to allow for fire vehicles to come down. The plan also calls for that road to be 20 feet wide. Right now it's about 10. So we had a conversation with Mr. Miller about, what can we go any less on that to just lessen the amount of excavation we're doing off cap, less tree clearing along there. And he agreed to meet with us to see if we can maybe go a little bit lower. So we're going to meet with them, and we're actually might even bring a truck out there to see what we're really going to need. And again, we are very amenable to, and we understand that we need to have fire and emergency services okay on this. And we will be meeting with him, again, should the board act favorably, we'll be meeting with him and coming up with an amenable plan. It's possible that it will have to be 20 feet, and that's going to be what the decision will be, but we're going to try to lessen that a little bit. Another element that they asked for was an extension of the existing water main that serves that apartment development so we can give them a hydrant a little bit closer to the bottom of the hill for the situation of a potential brush fire. We learned this morning when we had the conversation that this area is prone to brush fires. And what he wants is a hydrant, kind of splitting the difference between the paved area and the bottom of the hill and the gate, so they can bring brush trucks up and down and fill them up. Basically, a pumper would go and sit at the new hydrant location, and then the lighter brush trucks can run up and down, so they don't have to go all the way out to the main road to fill up. So we agreed to work with them on that, to come up with a proper location for the hydrant, and also give them a little bit wider road at that area so they can pull that pumper truck off the main way. And so then other trucks can get behind it, and then other trucks can come up and fill up and then go back down the hill. A very productive discussion today. I thought it was, we were well received, and we loved his input, and we look forward to working with them and satisfying any of their concerns as far as access and emergency services for this site. Let's see. Again, we talked about the traffic and the lack of traffic. Let's go to landscaping and buffering. Again, going to Exhibit A2, we are extremely isolated. It is my opinion that we are buffered naturally by not only the remoteness of the site, but by the existing vegetation pretty much on almost 90% on the perimeter of where we are doing our work. Understand that the request or the requirement for buffering, the intent of that is so we don't have a deleterious negative visual effect on our neighbors or passersby. But from a passersby perspective, I don't think anyone's going to know this is even there. They're just going to drive right by, and they're going to see that paved area, and they're going to say, oh, that's the driveway for the apartment complex. You have some people in the neighborhood, especially on Sayreville, because they're a little bit higher than the area itself. But in between those homes and the array itself, it's about 750 feet. And the elevation difference is such that any buffering down on the perimeter of our property, there's already vegetation that's fairly substantial and high, and any additional vegetation would really serve no purpose. We agreed to work with your professionals for some buffering or some screening on the area where the equipment will be on the equipment pad at the base, but we're sort of limited what we can and can't do because the cap actually extends fairly close to the gate area. And we, again, the cap is sacrosanct. We can't touch it. We can't put any trees in that area, but we will do our best to screen. Worst case we can do is some sort of fencing that's a ballasted fence. That's not the best way to do a fence, but we're, again, limited with some privacy screening, what have you. But again, in my opinion, the site elements themselves provide adequate buffering to the proposed array system. As far as lighting, we are not proposing any lighting, nor is it required by ordinance. But we were asked to work with your professionals, and we will, for emergency lighting at the base in the gated area. Again, if something happens at night and emergency personnel need to get there, we will work with them to do some sort of security lighting or site lighting, at least in the gate area, to maybe get in and out a little bit easier. But that's something that we're confident that we can work with your professionals to come to a amenable agreement on that issue as well. We talked about the fencing. The ordinance or the plan calls for fencing around the entire perimeter. Again, it's my opinion that what is there today, encompassing the landfill that's been there for decades, serving as security, the existing fence, would obviously remain. It would be repaired where needed if it's not up to a standard or it's failing in some spots. But around the rest of the array, it is our thought and our opinion that the existing condition, the existing vegetation, the existing swamp serves as a as an effective barrier to prohibit entrance to the site from the perimeter. So we will be requesting relief from providing a fence around the entire perimeter of the array. We talked about the amount of cars that are going to be here. Again, it's on the order of maybe 10 per year. They're typically only going to be one at a time, so there's no real need to do delineated parking. There is substantial area to park at the base of the access road that goes to the top. Again, looking at A1 down at the, basically at the area where the existing structure is and where the proposed combiner pad will be. There's a large gravel area. We had a site meeting there several weeks ago, and I think we had 5 or 6 cars parked on there, and it was fine. So there is enough parking. We just don't need to stripe it because it's going to be someone's going to be there for several hours, several times a year, and that's the limit of what we're going to need. Also, the landfill itself gets inspected periodically by the engineers who are responsible for that and the EPA/DEP. So they go out there too from time to time. They're going to be there more than we are because I think they may go out monthly or every 2 months or so to do the gas readings to make sure everything's in place. But again, that's only 1 or 2 people at one point, and there's adequate area for parking. The other areas in the redevelopment plan requirements, the one is 100 feet of street frontage, but it does allow for, I'm sorry, let's go back. The property that we're on, we're landlocked. We are independent of the access road, and there's private property between us and the public right-of-way. But as we discussed, we have a 30-foot wide access easement through that private property. But essentially, we don't have any road frontage on our piece specifically. The redevelopment plan allows for easements to serve as our road frontage effectively and our means of access. So in that respect, we do comply with the redevelopment plan. However, there is a small technicality with the municipal land use law. Municipal land use law has a section in it that all development needs to be fronting on an improved township right-of-way. Well, we don't have that, so we're asking for that relief from that technicality of the municipal land use law, and I'll be offering some planning testimony relative to that variance. In my opinion, that's a C2 variance that this board definitely has the authority to grant. We comply with setbacks. We comply with impervious coverage. Interesting engineering element of this, because the bulk of what we do in my office is stormwater management. The way this site is constructed, the entire landfill is essentially impervious. The last thing the DEP wants is rainwater to go into this landfill. So under about a foot of soil, there's an impermeable layer. So that's essentially, the cap itself is multiple elements. One of those elements is an impermeable geotextile that will not let rain through it. So rain will fall on top of this. It gets collected by a system of berms, and there's several, if you see from the aerial on, again, A2, there's a couple of these, you can probably see only the one on the, like in the southeast corner. It's like it looks like a concrete sidewalk, for lack of a better term. Those are like stoned flumes. So the stormwater on top gets collected and graded toward these, there's actually 4 of them around the site. Collect that rainwater, then discharge them to typical retention ponds, detention basins, and then that carries it out again towards the receiving waters. So from an impervious cover standpoint, we're not increasing at all because already it's essentially 100% impervious. We talked about glare, that we don't have a glare issue. The panels are absorptive as as we can get. The last thing we want is to lose the sunlight and get it reflected back to the sky. We want to grab as much as we can. There's a slight reflective nature to it, but it's very low. The array elements themselves are just going to be a gray steel color, so there's not going to be anything obtrusive from a visual perspective on the array elements themselves. Again, our neighbors in Sayreville and the residents of Old Bridge are going to look up at the hill and they'll see the back of these array elements, and it's just going to be, you know, galvanized steel, and that's the only thing that we're going to see. Groundwater monitoring and the surface monitoring, the gas monitoring will be ongoing. That's not done by the owner of the array. That's going to be done by the owner of the landfill through their consultants. So that'll be continuous, and that's not going to change from what's there today. And again, the array elements are positioned such that they do not interfere with that, with those operations. We have other outside agency approvals that we need. One, we got a letter of no interest from the county planning board. We need, the biggest one we need and the most lead time we need is the NJDEP major disruption permit. Again, they are the arbiters of everything that goes on here, and they are very specific in what they want, what they need, and they are very diligent in the work we've done. We've been working with them. A sister company of FWH is Trident Environmental. They have a bunch of LSRPs on staff and everything, and they are working with DEP to get the permits through this, and they have been working for months on this, and we're getting closer every day to getting those permits. And the other one we may need is the soil erosion sediment control plan. We are of the opinion that we are exempt based on their threshold of disturbance. We are going back and forth with them on that. Worst case, we will get an approval from them, but we think we're exempt and we're there. Other than that, that's the nature of what we're going to need as far as permits. Obviously, we need the board to act favorably on this in order to go further. We did get review letters from your board planner engineer and from the fire district. I can say pretty much 100% we agree with the comments on there, and we can address all of them. I can touch on a few items, and I guess if you your professionals want, we can go to items that they think are important. And unless you, I don't know how this board does it. If we want to go through each item, the pleasure of the board on that one.
Mr. Chairman, I think I heard the applicant say that he was going to do everything in our memo, so I'm not sure what we're going over, but.
Well, there's a couple of items that we're going to need waivers on that we already talked about. So I guess we should probably maybe go there. I can go through it really quick because we talked about the relative benefits. We talked about the access point. We talked about the 50-foot buffer, and that would be requesting a waiver or relief from that based on my testimony. We talked about working with your township planner about landscaping and fencing to meet the intent of the redevelopment plan. We talked about the visits. Again,
Can we talk about access for a minute?
Yes.
I know Vina did a lot of research when she was putting together the redevelopment plan on the requirements for improvements on the access. I just want to know, from the application materials that I have seen, I didn't see the exact documents on the easements that are granted to the property. Exactly, can you, one, provide us with the easement documents, and two, give us the language that's in there? Because although we would require, or we would, want you to improve them, I have to understand that probably the easement holders of the easements themselves would want the improvements as well, because after construction and after you have all these heavy vehicles traveling on there, they're going to want to see some improvements on those access roadways. So I want to see what that easement, what the language in the easement says.
So we are happy to provide that. We actually, as part of the initial submission, did a very large document, which was comprised of all of the existing covenants, restrictions, easements, and so it was so voluminous, I could see how some of the easement documents got lost, but we can certainly separately just provide copies of the 4 easements. There's 4 access easements that make up the rights in connection with accessing the property and going into the facility, and then there's specific within each of the 4 agreements that specifically allows for ingress and egress unobstructed. It basically says, in very similar nature, with or without vehicles and with loads of any nature, and for all purposes connected with the use and enjoyment of said lands of the grantees, and also an easement through and under said lands for the purpose of construction, reconstruction, repair, and maintenance.
Okay, so it doesn't give one person, it's a collective maintenance, right? So I would have to encourage the improvements after the construction is done, only for the benefit of the others that use it as well. So, although you might only have one visitor every 6 months, that access roadway is being used by others. And perhaps, even though I don't think portions of that roadway are in the best of conditions, I have to assume that after construction, or maybe even prior to construction, you'd want to maintain that roadway so that your vehicles have an easier way of getting to the property, 1, and then 2, after all said and done, that you leave that road probably in better condition, right, than what you have, started with.
Yes, and again, in my testimony, we talked about providing access for your emergency vehicles, and to me, that's the most important one. And that's what we're going to work with your fire officials on. We were given their specification for a gravel road to have a 30-ton load, and we will provide that. And again, we're going to need that for construction vehicles anyway. But the intent is, at the end, we want to make sure all vehicles get there, especially emergency vehicles, because if there's a fire out there, last thing we want is to get them stuck in some rut on this gravel road. So again, I guess that could be part of a bond release or something like that to make sure that that road is left in a condition such that traversing it is relatively easy. I just didn't think, based on the condition of the existing pavement, that a mill and pave was necessary. But I mean, we can look at that too, again, as part of compliance. But my view, the most important thing is to be able to get emergency vehicles in and out easily, and of course, that's going to be post-construction as well.
Mm-hmm. I just look at from the avenue of, these are your neighbors, and while you're in construction phase, it will be disruptive to them. That's a residential area that you're going to be accessing to get to your site. And if at the end of the day, they see that you're bettering that access road after your construction is completed, it only goes that much further as a neighbor. Now, granted, once you're complete, you're not going to be disruptive at all to them because your visits to the site are going to be far and few between. But I think as neighbors, I think the ask is not that great.
Well, to repave the road, I mean, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, we can clean it up and make it look nicer, because right now it doesn't look the greatest from like a maintenance standpoint. But I think just repaving for the sake of repaving for aesthetics is unnecessary. If there was damage to the pavement or the subgrade was failing, of course, we'll agree to fix it, to make it up to code. But from an aesthetic standpoint, I think cleaning it would solve or serve that purpose.
Did you do pavement cores to see if the pavement there can withstand the load of a 30-ton?
Not yet. We just found out that 30-ton specification today.
So would you be amenable to then providing us with pavement cores to demonstrate that the load can take a 30-ton vehicle?
We're going to have to, because we're going to have to satisfy your emergency services.
And Nicole, could there be some language inserted for a post-construction inspection of that roadway?
I mean, I would be happy to see what the pavement cores show as far as the pavement. I have to. I mean, it's been quite some time since I've been back to that access road, but I would just say, if we take a look at that, if the fire marshal is going to make him do it anyway, let's make it a condition of approval. And once we see that, and if the road there is built up where they don't have to do that and they have to only do spot repairs, I'm okay with that. But to me, I think it's going to be the opposite. I think it's going to show that you're going to need to build up that roadway. And then at the end of the day, I feel like, you're going to have to better that roadway, especially for your neighbors there. They're going to be disrupted by the construction. So I think if we made that a condition in there, I think that would be acceptable from my view.
Post-construction, after everything's done, to check the roadway.
He's going to have to do it because he's going to put the construction vehicles on there.
Yes.
So let's do it just to see if it's going to withstand. We could do photo. I know Vina from her redevelopment report has a lot of photos of that access roadway. And from what I saw in those photos, I didn't see anything good.
But in addition to the should we put something in there for post-construction in case there's any damage done during construction?
Sure, yeah.
So, Mr. Marucci, when I was working on the redevelopment study, like Nicole has seen those pictures, engineering office actually had gone to the site. At that time, it was Jonathan Blank who had visited this site, taken pictures for me, and we had seen that the condition of the road is not that great, so at some point they would need it. I think it's a great idea to do it before construction.
Okay.
Also, it is, the landfill is capped. And I mean, just like, the applicant's engineer, I always look at stormwater first. And, since it's capped, they really do comply with any stormwater management rules. And I'm pretty sure when they go in front of NJDEP and they submit their application for an NJDEP major landfill disruption permit, that there are other programs in there, like the land use regulation program that sort of looks at stormwater management. And they look at all these elements. So it's not that anything would be missed. I mean, they're out there monitoring. I did put a comment in that I saw that on the plan there was a distance requirement that you had to be from the monitoring wells. And there were different symbols for some of the monitoring wells that are above my pay grade. But when I did see that, although you were saying that it was 10 feet separation or a minimum of 10-foot separation, some of them, when I scaled it off, were less than 10 feet.
Yeah, well, I saw that comment, and we will clarify that, and if needed, move a panel or two just to make sure we're 10-foot clear.
Okay.
That will be definitely clarified on the subsequent revision.
And just one point, just to make for the record, and I know it's not necessarily a point that would justify the grant of relief from the provision, but providing paving versus gravel to the extent that the gravel can show or meet the testing is a significant difference in terms of cost, and it's a very lengthy amount of road. And part of the consideration in terms of why they're bringing this project is because they got a very limited award based on the fact that they're serving customers in low and moderate income homes. And with that, they give very specific discounted rates. So it means that overall the cost and the profits to be derived in connection with the project are limited in nature. And so therefore, it's more cost conscious than you would say for another type of solar project. So there's a sensitivity in terms of having very extensive overhead for the project, particularly since at the end of the day, there will be very, very few site visits in connection with the actual proposed solar use. And so for that reason, the applicant is absolutely saying, we'll do whatever is necessary, but in terms of, and that's why it was a significant part of our conversation with the fire official today, the gravel versus the paving. He felt that the paving would be adequate, and we agreed that we have to ensure that that's sufficient. But the concern was, also, and so we had to say it from a cost perspective as well, just because it does impact the ability to bring the project as well in terms of, at the end of the day.
It's really not this board's
we understand. That's
responsibility
why I said it's not really a
worry about your
factor,
budget.
a determining factor. We just felt it was important to note that. But again, we're happy to, as was previously indicated, work with the planning department absolutely with respect to their comments to their satisfaction as a condition of approval.
Engineering and planning. I just said engineering and planning.
Planning and engineering and fire.
I appreciate the clarification. I did not know that. Yeah, thank you.
So going back to the letter, I can just skip to the items that we would want to maybe put off, because there was a couple questions specifically related to documents that we would submit for building permits, like structural calculations for wind load, structural calculations for the concrete ballast. Typically, we do that after compliance, and the structural engineer will do that with his design. So obviously, we agree we need to provide that and that it be compliant, but that's typically done at building permit time versus site plan.
I mean, I think my comment was, add the wind load onto like the detail or provide the additional detail for the ballast because it was unclear as to the dimensions. I think it was like, obviously when you're doing that ballast foundation, there's like three, length, width, and depth, and I didn't see one of the dimensions on there.
Okay.
So I was just saying, be
All right,
clearer
so
on the
as far as
detail.
clarification, yeah, we can,
Yes.
this is still working, right? Okay.
Yes.
As far as we can do that, and but just know that detailed calculations is in our wheelhouse. I'm not a structural engineer,
Yep,
but
that's
again,
fine.
okay, that's understood.
And then
We
just
can-
know
we
that
can
you're-
supplement that with notes on the drawing.
Yes,
about-
just know, should the board act favorably on the application?
Yes.
You have to go through resolution compliance.
Yes.
On these plans prior to even being able to submit a building permit application. You have to have signed plans. As part of our due diligence, we make sure all your outside agency approval and that NJDEP major landfill disruption permit is received prior to anything, and any exemption letters. So I know that there was an exemption that you were trying to get from Freehold Soil Conservation. You had mentioned that Middlesex County had given you an exemption. We'd like that letter.
Yes.
And then NJDEP land use regulation permit, I think there was an applicability determination, and they had said that this does not apply. I would want something from them too, and that would make me feel better because there's a wetlands line that you show on there, but you don't give me an LOI number on there.
No
And
problem.
what I'm asking for is if you have the LOI that went with that line, even if it's expired, you're so far away, but I just want to know that there's some sort of delineation.
Absolutely no problem, and I hear everything you're saying, and we are in agreement that we will comply with your engineer hopefully during resolution compliance to make sure all their concerns are satisfied.
Thank you.
We can skip to the fire review, but I think I covered everything with that, with the comments saying that we were going to meet on site to talk about the road spec, the location for the hydrant. So it's my testimony that we we had a conference call with your fire official today, and we are both of the opinion that we can come to an amenable agreement for both sides to make sure we're satisfying everything from a life safety perspective with your fire district.
Chairman Marucci, I just want to chime in. The fire official did call me in the evening to confirm that they had a conversation this afternoon. He did mention that they have, should the board act favorably, they will be meeting on site and walking through the site and coming up with a location for the fire hydrant that is acceptable to the fire official. And they will continue working with him on any emergency access issues.
Okay, thank you.
So we talked about the various relief that we're requesting from the board. One is the fencing around the entire perimeter, the 50-foot planted buffer. We talked about the issue that we do not have right-of-way frontage, and the issue with the road widening. In my opinion, the road frontage issue is a simple C1 variance that the board has the authority to grant. Due to, again, the C1 criteria, strict enforcement would result in practical difficulty and unnecessary hardship given the existing conditions of the property and surrounding areas. So obviously, you can see on A2, we fit the criteria of reason of exceptional features affecting this specific piece of property, namely the landlocked lot, only accessible via easements through other privately held lots.
Can we pause just take a second there? Because that's where I actually speaking with the planner, have a little question on, because when I stand from your testimony, just a couple questions here. From your testimony is that this is not a requirement from our redevelopment plan, but a requirement of state statute. So one of our concerns is how does this board grant a variance from a state statute requirement, not a municipal requirement? And two, also to clarify, because I think earlier you testified that it would fall under the C2 classification, but now you just testified C1. So
I'll have C2 testimony for the other things, but on this one, I believe the C1 satisfies it.
So can you maybe address how this board can grant a variance from a state statute?
Well, it's in the municipal land use law, and I've been through various boards, and it's no different than a single family house not having frontage on an improved road, because it states that as well. And it's a bulk variance, in my opinion, that this board has jurisdiction to offer.
Right, and under the applicable case law, which we could provide to the board as well, it indicates that relief can be granted from the planning board in connection with that particular section of the MLUL.
And do you mind telling me what section we're talking about? Because I just don't have it in front of me. I didn't bring my MLUL book. I apologize. I was trying to find it online and I couldn't get it.
Second.
Joe, but I thought when we crafted the redevelopment, I knew this issue would come up. I thought that the lot frontage requirement is when you're creating newer subdivisions. When in the redevelopment plan, we say that lot frontage requirement can be exempt if you have proper mechanism like the easements in place, then I don't think you require variance, because one, I have not seen a board grant deviation from the state statute. I've seen C variances being granted. So if this was a requirement of the redevelopment plan and you would have asked for a C1 or a deviation, I understand, but not from the state statute. But in this case, to avoid that situation,
You have a specific provision within your plan.
Yes, we had language.
We
in the
agree with that. We actually, the way that we did our notice was in the event that it's found to be necessary, we're seeking this relief. So we're asking for it. If the board determines or you determine that it's not necessary, we do believe it's absolutely covered under the redevelopment plan, specifically by the language that was crafted, which says to the extent that you don't have 100 feet of frontage, you can have that access by means of an easement, which we provided proof that we have, 4 access easements that make up the entrance for ingress, egress to the property.
That's what I believe so, because the state statute is the state statute. The board doesn't have really jurisdiction to override a state statute, but the lot frontage issue becomes more predominant when you're creating newer lots or residential lots, because why do we have that state statute? It's for fire emergency.
So it's an uncommon provision that we don't often see to begin with, and then when you do see it, most of the time, you're right, it's associated with a subdivision when you're creating a lot that has that issue that you're seeking that relief. So this is an unusual circumstance, but even in this case, if the board were to find that it's necessary, it does fall under C relief, so it wouldn't be something which would be like a D that would, trigger the need or deprive the board of jurisdiction. But that being said, if the board makes a finding that it's not necessary, we're more than happy to
Because the plan has the provision that if you don't have frontage, you need to have the access easement in place, which I know I've seen the document, you have it in place. So I don't believe a deviation is even required.
And I'm comfortable with that. Because my concern is the same thing, and I'm not questioning.
It's an anomaly.
There could be case law on there that I'm not aware of that allows for it, but I'm sitting here, I'm not aware of exactly the statutory requirement for this and how it applies to this particular development, and how the board could grant the variance relief for it. But I do understand how we've look to address that in the plan, the redevelopment plan. So I think we can acknowledge that in the approval. If the board grants approval, we can acknowledge that provision and how it's being addressed. But I just don't, if we're going to ask for variance relief, I think we need to take some time to look into that, or I need to review that information before I can advise this board that they have the authority to grant that variance. But if we're in agreement sitting here that that variance is not necessary and we can grant it without it, acknowledging that that was the intent of the redevelopment plan, I think that addresses that concern.
I think I'm comfortable if the board is comfortable with that.
And the applicant is fine as well.
Yes. That answered my question, sorry.
I do want to talk about the fencing and the landscaping, though. I did have conversations with the team. The fencing would actually be a requirement, if not the entire site. I would want to work with the applicant to come up with areas where we would want fencing, especially because this facility is very close to a residential neighborhood. We would hate to see this become a place for people loitering around and then encourage nefarious activities on the site. So having a security gate, having a fencing eliminates that problem. And should the board act favorably, I would recommend that the applicant work with us. You should still ask for a waiver because I know it's not feasible to fence the entire site. However, some fencing definitely would be required.
So we can call it a waiver from strict compliance to that element of the redevelopment plan.
I think
knowing
it's
that we would work out the details with your office.
correct. So it's section 4.6 L1 and 2, which talks about fencing and landscaping. Same thing with landscaping. I know I had a conversation this morning with Ms. Wolfman about the landscaping issue too, around the concrete padding. I know we need to take some more time to evaluate it, and we'll finalize it during the compliance plan stage.
I have one question too with the fencing. The equipment on the pad down at the bottom, is the equipment fully caged in fencing?
Right now, we're not proposing it, but they're going to be in cabinets, and the cabinets are locked. But your electrical subcode official may require, because he is the authority having jurisdiction, the AHD, so he may require a separate fence, and if that's the case, we would have to comply.
On that note of vandalism and...
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So we have the issues of strict compliance with the fencing, the landscaping, and the roadway. So if we look at it from a variance perspective, again, in my opinion, the board has the authority to grant deviation under the C2 criteria. There's several proofs we have to do with the C2 criteria. One, show that it's relative to a specific piece of property. Obviously it is. It's the lot and block we're talking about tonight, the isolated landfill property, the global landfill. We have to show that purposes of the land use law will be advanced with the granting of the deviation. In my opinion, we have purposes G, to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, recreational, commercial, industrial uses, and open space, both public and private, according to their respective environmental requirements, in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. Purpose I, to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. Purpose M, to encourage coordination of various public and private procedures and activities shaping land development with a view to the more efficient use of land. And purpose N, to promote utilization of renewable energy resources. A specific purpose of the land use law is the project that we're proposing tonight. Negative criteria, we have to show that there's no substantial detriment to the public good. We talked about the screening and the isolated nature of the site. It's extremely innocuous. Again, my opinion, from the passersby, no one's even going to know it's there. From the perspective of the road, we will meet your emergency services requirements. We understand that that is paramount. And again, that would serve to satisfy in my opinion, the intent of that regulation. And then also typically with the negative criteria, we have to look to see the effect of granting that variance would have on the surrounding properties and whether or not the granting would cause a damage to the character of the neighborhood. In my opinion, all required variances will have an effect on minimizing we'll call it the future look or character of the surrounding neighborhood, because we're going to be trying to be as invisible as possible. And the variances themselves would be effectively invisible. So it's my professional opinion there will be no detriment to the public good, and benefits of this proposed community solar project on a vacant, closed Superfund site outweigh any perceived detriment.
That concludes our testimony.
Okay, with that, do we have any questions or any additional comments from the board professionals?
I don't.
Okay, how about the board members? Any questions? Mr. Lenning?
You had mentioned the slopes and, you know, the topography of the landfill. Would you say that this project would build out this property?
You could probably fit a little bit more solar on top, but we're starting to get close in the easterly section to that slope. Whether there could be arrays somewhere else on site, I'm not really sure, but we're going to be pretty close to this is what best we can do, to be quite frank, just because we're limited. And we were trying to stay away from that area because that's an area of a previous failure. So DEP really asked us to kind of honor that if we could.
You mentioned the failure. If there was something to happen to this site and it was in the area of this solar field, are you required to remove that?
Yes. Oh, yeah. DEP will be all over everybody to make sure that gets remediated, one, promptly, two, adequately, and anything that was there that they felt caused a situation would have to be removed, yes. They, again, will have ultimate responsibility over this, and they pretty much rule us to that point.
And the last thing, we spoke about the fencing. I think it's important, the critical areas, to fence those off.
Agreed.
There's neighborhoods fairly close, you know, you don't want children coming in. You are generating a lot of power.
Yep.
So you want to make sure it's as safe as possible, so.
Yeah, we agree. The last thing we want is to be an attractive nuisance. So anything we can do to alleviate that, we agree.
Is there any evidence of any ATV or, you know, quad or motorcycle
Not when
activity
we
back
were
there?
Didn't see any ruts or anything like that. It actually looked like it's abandoned pretty much, you know. We just happened to be there recently from a mowing. So it actually, the vegetation up top was rather low. One of the LSRPs we were with, he's been there previously where it's, you know, maybe 2 feet high. So we haven't seen any evidence of trespassing, because that's actually what it would be.
Well, that's a good segue into my next question. As far as landscape maintenance, who takes care of that?
The subsequent owner of the array will have to do the mowing on top of the mound.
Okay.
And again, you're looking at maybe 2 or 3 times a year, because it's going to be like a meadow mix. It's not a lawn per se that needs a lot of maintenance, or to just go there to cut it down to make it, you know, functional.
And accessible. Okay.
Also, is this the only access to that site?
Yes.
Okay, so there's nothing down.
Now, if you look at A2, the aerial, this is essentially swampland, almost 90% around the site. It's extremely isolated.
Okay, because I know there's another dump area down, I guess it's down further.
Yeah.
Central Park.
Is there any signage?
There will be a couple signs that we're going to show on the fence of like, contact numbers for emergencies, what have you. Your fire code official asked that we add a sign kind of at the base of that, I'll call it a ramp, the road that goes to the top, to say, no heavy vehicles beyond this point, just so his brush trucks can go up there, but he doesn't want a driver of a pumper to try to go up there. I don't think anyone would. It's a fairly steep road. Honestly, I wouldn't go up with a pickup truck, but more adventurous people than me.
Any like high voltage warning signs or any?
It'll be typical signage that's required by the code. So yeah, there will be signage throughout the site for that type of thing. Okay. And that'll be detailed on the detailed electrical drawings. Yeah, the electrical drawings would probably be almost like a 30, 40 sheet set. It's pretty extensive. Wow.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't know. That's an electrical situation. I'm not sure, but we will. But yeah, but it's all grounded, so maybe not. I'm not sure, but we will definitely look into that.
Chairman?
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Will there be security cameras out there on this site?
We are not proposing any security cameras. The only security we have is the telemetry of the system itself, where if a panel or two is non-functioning, we would be notified. But we weren't planning on any sort of camera security. Due to the remote nature, it's going to be fenced and secure.
Okay. And did I hear you say that you only had a foot of cover between the cap and the top?
I have the spec here, so I don't speak out of turn. So the cap on the crown of the mound, it consists of a 6-inch thick vegetative cover support layer, a 12-inch thick soil cover layer. Then we have a single-sided geocomposite drainage layer. Then the 40 mil linear low-density polyethylene geomembrane, a bentomat geosynthetic clay liner, then 12 inches thick of soil grading. So it's an extensive cap. But essentially before that impermeable layer, it's 18 inches.
You can work with 18 inches with these foundations?
Well, we're not allowed to touch any of that. So everything's sitting right on top of that.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not doing any excavation whatsoever.
And my other question, how are you getting the power out the road to the existing?
So at the bottom, going to A1, there's the array again is going to create DC electric converted by the inverters to AC. It's going to be on raceways or conduit going down the hill to electrical devices that combine it and up the voltage, et cetera, transformers. And then there's a series of utility poles that house transformers, switch gear, that kind of transfer our stuff to the utility. There's got to be a defining break line from responsibility from the array to the utility. And there's actually an existing series of utility poles that go up this entrance road. If you can now switch to A2, that goes it goes up the entrance road because the site has power now because it was a Superfund site and there was pumps activating, lighting for the systems, et cetera. So there's a system of utility poles already there, but that's only single-phase electric, and we're going to have three-phase electric, so we're going to beef up that the cabling going up the hill along the gravel access road, and then there's going to be a tie-in point in the residential community but the specific pole we don't know yet. That's being designed now.
So coming off the site, you're going to be underground in a conduit?
It's going to be above ground, but it could be in conduit. So if it's in conduit, it's going to be like buried in some gravel that will be imported, but sometimes they'll just do a raceway, what they call. It's like an aluminum channel, and there's just cabling in that aluminum channel that'll just go down the hill.
Now, it has to be above grade on the cap, but once it goes beyond the cap?
Well, once it goes beyond the cap, we'll be above ground on the poles.
Gotcha.
The cap goes very close to that gate.
Would you say the elevation difference was to the top
I
of
think, I believe we're like elevation 15 at the bottom, and it's like 90 at the top, so it's
Like
significant.
75 feet?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's,
I wasn't sure if you were saying like 7 or 8 feet or 78 feet. I
no,
wasn't sure if you were saying
it's up there.
78 feet.
Yes.
Will that gate be locked?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's locked now, just so you know. There's actually several locks on it, but on one chain, different entities have different locks for themselves.
They all have to be at the same time and turn the key at the same
There's
time?
different parts of the chain, and you can get it open, but different entities have their own lock.
Okay, any other questions? Ms. Maselli?
Yes. I don't believe so. I believe it's all for the community solar. So it would be for their customers, but that is, we'll have to look into that. I'm not really sure. But the system itself is sized. We're kind of limited to what we can do. They didn't say, oh, you can have as much as you want, right? They said we're around 2.8 megs we're allowed, and that's what we're producing. So they didn't say, oh, you can have 5 meg and 2.8 is going to go to these customers. They kind of figure out how much they need in this area based on the customer base and how much relief they can get via the program.
So you're planning on about 100% utilization?
Yes.
And with the consumer, there's no device, nothing on their homes.
Correct.
No additional charge.
Correct.
All right. It all
Yeah, the other-
transforms at that base that you were talking about.
Yes. The other systems you guys have probably seen are called net metered systems, where they're next to the facility or even on like your house, right? So when you're producing power more than you're absorbing power from the grid, your meter essentially spins backwards. That's not going to be the case here because it's going to just be kind of a virtual meter, we'll call it, okay? Those subscribers will reap the benefits from this remote array.
So the power is metered still through the same JCP&L meter on the home?
Oh, yes, sure.
Okay. And that's how they read.
And they'll know internally that customer is a member, I guess, of the community solar program, and they get the benefits of the offsite array, and it'll get adjusted with the bill.
Gotcha. Okay, anyone else?
I have one more question. So is there an outreach program to the residents? How do they find out about this program?
I believe the subscriber organization handles that, any outreach.
Does JCP&L have a handle in or hand in doing any of that outreach to their existing customers?
I believe it's the subscriber.
Just the subscriber?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's their best interest to get as many subscribers as they can.
Sure.
And again, they have the obligation on this project specifically that over, I think it's 51% of that capacity is allotted to low, medium income individuals or entities.
Gotcha.
So there's a qualification process that has to be followed as well.
Okay. All right, anybody else? Going once? Okay, we will now open up the public for questions for this witness, but I don't see anybody out there. So we will close the public portion.
My best type of objection.
Okay, so if there's nothing else, we can hand it up to you for your summary.
Have any further witnesses?
We do not. At this point, we rest, on the basis of the testimony that's been presented by Ms. Wolfman, her factual testimony in terms of representing the applicant and discussing, their reasons for coming to the community, some of the community benefits to be derived by the project and the background with respect to how the project works and where it will be located. And then, of course, our planning and engineering testimony that gave you the specifics in terms of this site, the deviations, and walk through the comments and the fact that the applicant is absolutely willing to comply with the spirit and intent of all the comments and work actively with the planning and engineering departments as well as the fire department in order to satisfy compliance with all of those comments. So with that, we close.
Mr. Chairman, I know there's no one here, but officially, the meeting's been open to the public for comment.
Yep.
But there's no one here.
Any public comments? Okay, we'll close the public comment portion.
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to summarize? Okay, so a vote in favor of this application would be for granting the major preliminary and final site plan approval with the relief being requested from the redevelopment requirements being the fencing requirement, the 50-foot landscape buffer, and the widening of the roadway. With all three of these relief requests, the applicant has agreed to work with the appropriate township department, whether it be the planner's office, the engineer's office, or the fire official, to make such adjustments to the proposed plans to be as in compliance and to make as it safe, address public safety as possible. So the waiver will be from strict compliance with the requirements, but there will be some compliance, from the applicant. The conditions of approval that I have on my list are that the applicant will, or subsequent owner of and operator of the facilities, will remove all equipment and improvements at the end of the useful life or the lease term of this property. That one of the general conditions is that the developer, or the applicant or the property owner will have entered into the redevelopment agreements, including pilots with the municipality. And as I stated, as part of the relief being granted, but just to be specific, that the applicant has agreed to work with the fire official with regard to determining the required width of the roadway, where it's currently 10, the plan requires 20, and they will work with the fire official to determine what is required for fire safety purposes. The second condition with regard to the fire official is that they will work with the fire official to determine the extension of the water main and new hydrant and the location of that to address the fire official's report, comments and concerns in the report. The applicant will agree to work with the board professionals with regard to providing screening and fencing, potential fencing as required around the equipment pad at the base of the site, understanding that it may be limited by the extent of where the cap is located, but that they will work with the board's professionals to try to address that. The applicant will further work with the board's professionals, township's professionals, with regard to any potential security lighting that may be required near the gate and entrance of the facility. And those are the conditions I have.
Okay.
Notes are a little crazy this one.
Okay, with those conditions and with the end of all testimony, if there's nothing else from board professionals or the board members, we'll put it to a motion and vote. So do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
By Mr. De Palma, and a second?
I'll second.
By Mr. Lenning.
Chairman Marucci?
Yes.
Ms. Cannon? Yes. Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Petty?
Yes.
Ella?
Yes.
Mr. McIsaac?
Yes.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and prior to adjournment, I have to open it to general public comments.
Oh, you got it.
There. Okay, we'll close the public portion, and do I have a motion to adjourn? By multiple board members, and a second by multiple board members.
Chairman?
Yes.
Ms. Cannon?
Yes.
Yes.
Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Petty?
Yes.
Yes.
Has anybody ever said no? to adjournment?